Everyone knows Dave. Dave was bragging to his boss one day, "You know, I know everyone there is to know. Just name someone, anyone, and I know them." Tired of his boasting, his boss called his bluff. "Okay, Dave, how about Tom Cruise?" "No dramas, boss. Tom and I are old friends, and I can prove it." So Dave and his boss fly out to Hollywood and knock on Tom Cruise's door, and Tom Cruise shouts, "Dave. What's happening? Great to see you. Come on in for a beer." Although impressed, Dave's boss is still skeptical. After they leave Cruise's house, he tells Dave that he thinks him knowing Cruise was just lucky. No, just name anyone else," Dave says. "President Obama," his boss quickly retorts. "Yup," Dave says, "old buddies, let's fly out to Washington," and off they go. At the White House, Obama spots Dave on the tour and motions him and his boss over, saying, "Dave, what a surprise, I was just on my way to a meeting. But you and your friend come on in and let's have a beer first and catch up." Well, the boss is very shaken by now but still not totally convinced. After they leave the White House grounds, he expresses his doubts to Dave, who again implores him to name anyone else. "Pope Francis," his boss replies. "Sure," says Dave. "I've known the Pope for years." So off they fly to Rome. Dave and his boss are assembled with the masses at the Vatican St. Peter's Square when Dave says, "This will never work. I can't catch the Pope's eye among all these people. Tell you what, I know all the guards, so let me just go upstairs and I'll come out on the balcony with the Pope." He disappears into the crowd headed towards the Vatican. Sure enough, half an hour later Dave emerges with the Pope on the balcony, but by the time Dave returns, he finds that his boss has had a heart attack and is surrounded by paramedics. Making his way to his boss's side, Dave asks him, "What happened?" His boss looks up and says, "It was the final straw. You and the Pope came out onto the balcony and the man next to me said, 'Who the fuck is that on the balcony with Dave?'" A monocle walks into a bar. After a few drinks he starts to feel pretty good, and a little uncoordinated. He reaches for a cigarette, but the bartender stops him. "Sorry, buddy, but due to city ordinances we don't allow smoking in here. You'll have to step outside to smoke." So the monocle hops off the bar stool and grabs his cigarettes to head outside. Meanwhile a second monocle emerges from the bathroom. They bump into each other as they cross paths and fall to the floor, hopelessly entangled. They try to get free, but the more they struggle, the more tangled they become. The bartender looks down on this travesty and shakes his head. "Hey you two!" he shouts. "Stop making spectacles of yourselves." A lost dog strays into a jungle. A lion sees this from a distance and says with caution, "This guy looks edible, never seen his kind before." So the lion starts rushing towards the dog with menace. The dog notices and starts to panic, but as he's about to run he sees some bones next to him and gets an idea and says loudly, "That was some good lion meat." The lion abruptly stops and says, "Whoa. This guy seems tougher than he looks, I better leave while I can." Over by the treetop, a monkey witnessed everything. Evidently, the monkey realizes that he can benefit from this situation by telling the lion and getting something in return. So the monkey proceeds to tell the lion what really happened, and the lion says angrily, "Get on my back, we'll get him together." So they start rushing back to the dog. The dog sees them and realized what happened and starts to panic even more. He then gets another idea and shouts, "Where the hell is that monkey? I told him to bring me another lion an hour ago." A wife decides to take her husband, Dave, to a strip club for his birthday. They arrive at the club and the doorman says, "Hey, Dave. How you doing?" His wife is puzzled and asks if he's been to this club before. "Oh no," says Dave. "He's on my bowling team." When they are seated, a waitress asks Dave if he'd like his usual and brings over a Budweiser. His wife is becoming increasingly uncomfortable and says, "How did she know that you drink Budweiser?" "She's in the ladies' bowling league, honey. We share lanes with them." A stripper then comes over to their table, throws her arms around Dave, and says, "Hi Davey. Want your usual table dance, big boy?" Dave's wife, now furious, grabs her purse and storms out of the club. Dave follows and spots her getting into a cab. Before she can slam the door, he jumps in beside her. He tries desperately to explain how the stripper must have mistaken him for someone else, but his wife is having none of it. She is screaming at him at the top of her lungs, calling him every name in the book. The cabbie turns his head and says, "Looks like you picked up a real bitch tonight, Dave." Once upon a time, in the magical fantasy kingdom, there lived a young monk named Sam. His order was renowned for their beautiful choral singing. They trained, hours every day, refining their voices and their art. Their song floated down the mountainside, enriching the lives and souls of the townspeople below. Sam was particularly gifted, and on his 19th birthday, in mid-song, he hit upon a beautifully intricate note of pure magic. Everyone within miles just froze in mid-action, stirred to the very core of their souls by the pure bliss of the tone. And all the realm realized, instantly, that it was Sam, and Sam was the first person in history to hit one of the rumored magical notes that musicians had theorized must exist. Yet no one before Sam had ever reached one. And on Sam's 20th birthday, it happened again. This time, the town below was so impacted that no one moved, spoke, or even blinked for several minutes after. As the golden sound finally tapered off and ceased, they knew that Sam had found the second note. And the next year on Sam's birthday, the town had realized there was a pattern involved. This time, all of the townspeople were present in the monastery's nave, watching in awe, as Sam hit the glorious third note. People cried out in pure joy as the sound grew to a glorious crescendo. Words cannot do justice to the experience. The town flourished, as Sam's notes made the people pure all the way to the core of their beings. And on it went for the next few years, the magical notes growing sweeter and sweeter. Until, that is, Sam's 25th birthday. All at first seemed as normal. Until Sam hit the magical note. From the start, Sam seemed very uncomfortable, and this new sound was not beautiful. It was jarring and discordant. Sam started to get very warm, and was visibly sweating on stage. He doubled his resolve and dug deeper, to get to the sweet part of the magical note that he knew must be there. Suddenly, to the horror of all, Sam spontaneously combusted. The two closest monks on stage were burned by the flames coming off of his body, and he ignited the stage curtains. Soon the entire monastery was aflame. By a miracle, everyone made it out, except for poor Sam. The townsfolk were left staring at the burning monastery in sad, stunned disbelief. The mayor approached the lead monk of the order. "What happened?" he asked, exasperated. The old monk shook his head sadly. "Isn't it obvious?" he said. Sam sung note 7. One day, Albert Einstein was on his way to a science convention for a speech. On the way there, he tells his driver that looks a bit like him. "I'm sick of all these conferences. I always say the same things over and over." The driver agrees, "You're right. As your driver, I attended all of them, and even though I don't know anything about science, I could give the conference in your place." "That's a great idea," says Einstein. "Let's switch places then." So they switch clothes, and as soon as they arrive, the driver dressed as Einstein goes on stage and starts giving the usual speech, while the real Einstein, dressed as the car driver, attends it. But in the crowd, there is one scientist who wants to impress everyone and thinks of a very difficult question to ask Einstein, hoping he won't be able to respond. So this guy stands up and interrupts the conference by posing his very difficult question. The whole room goes silent, holding their breath, waiting for the response. The driver looks at him, dead in the eye, and says, "Sir, your question is so easy that I'm going to let my driver explain it to you." A man walks out to the street and catches a taxi just going by. He gets into the taxi, and the cabbie says, "Perfect timing. You're just like Frank." Passenger, "Who?" Cabbie, "Frank Feldman. He's a guy who did everything right all the time. Like my coming along when you needed a cab, things happened like that to Frank Feldman every single time." Passenger, "There are always a few clouds over everybody." Cabbie, "Not Frank Feldman. He was a terrific athlete. He could have won the Grand Slam at tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone and danced like a Broadway star, and you should have heard him play the piano. He was an amazing guy." Passenger, "Sounds like he was really something special." Cabbie, "There's more. He had a memory like a computer. He remembered everybody's birthday. He knew all about wine, which foods to order and which fork to eat them with. He could fix anything. Not like me. I change a fuse, and the whole street blacks out. But Frank Feldman could do everything right." Passenger, "Wow, what a guy." Cabbie, "He always knew the quickest way to go in traffic and avoid traffic jams. Not like me, I always seem to get stuck in them. But Frank, he never made a mistake, and he really knew how to treat a woman and make her feel good. He would never answer her back even if she was in the wrong, and his clothing was always immaculate, shoes highly polished too. He was the perfect man. He never made a mistake. No one could ever measure up to Frank Feldman." Passenger, "How did you meet him?" Cabbie, "I never actually met Frank. He died and I married his wife." Son, "Daddy, I fell in love and want to date this awesome girl." Father, "That's great, son. Who is she? Son, it's Sandra, the neighbor's daughter. Father, oh, I wish you hadn't said that. I have to tell you something, son, but you must promise not to tell your mother. Sandra is actually your sister. The boy is naturally bummed out, but a couple of months later. Son, Daddy, I fell in love again and she is even hotter. Father, that's great, son. Who is she? Son, it's Angela, the other neighbor's daughter. Father, oh, I wish you hadn't said that. Angela is also your sister. This went on a few more times, and finally the son was so mad, he went straight to his mother crying. Son, Mom, I am so mad at Dad. I fell in love with 6 girls and I can't date any of them because Dad is their father. The mother hugs him affectionately and says, you can date whoever you want. He isn't your father. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and leave your comments.